In the summer between my sixth and seventh grade years, I attended Baylor University for young people. It was on the campus of Baylor University, and you were able to take classes and learn. And I was able to take a couple of different classes that summer. One was on the Macintosh computer. You guys remember that? Like that computer, and the screen was about that big. I never understood that, even back then. I mean, it's like this little tiny little screen, and I learned about that. It was cutting edge at the time, really, big time. The other, though, was a class that was much more impactful for me than learning about the Macintosh. It was a communications class. Baylor has a world-renowned communications department, and you might have heard of a couple of their graduates from that department before. A guy by the name of Trey Wingo, who has been an ESPN anchor for many, many years, graduated from that department. And for you ladies out there, you might have heard of a little lady named Joanna Gaines. Yes, she graduated from Baylor's communication department as well. It was in that class, though, that I learned the behind the scenes of TV and radio. Something that really intrigued me at that time. And I remember they talking to us about the TV broadcast. It was in those days that we would only usually have it at 6 and 10, and if you were maybe in a major city, you got it at 5, 6, and 10, or the World News at World News Tonight at 5:30. But so they had us analyze different parts of the news broadcast and different things. And one of the biggest lessons that I learned about communications was I learned about sensationalism. Sensationalism is the act by newspapers, television, etc., of presenting information in a way that is shocking or is exciting. In radio, we would call this the tease. You tease what's coming up, what you're about to talk to, because you want to hook the listener, you want to hook the viewer, or you want them to stay tuned, or in our modern era of the internet, you want them to hit that click button. Have you ever clicked a link, read an article, thought that the article didn't match the headline? Sure you have. That's sensationalism. One of the tactics of journalists and media personality is to use fear to elicit a response. You're sitting in your easy chair, you're sipping your perfectly sweetened tea, you got your feet up, you're enjoying your favorite TV show when the news anchor pops up and says, "Deadly murder hornets invade the U.S., the story at 10. Now, I don't know about you, I wasn't planning on watching the news tonight, but I need to know if I'm going to die or not. So I'm tuning in. Why? It's fear. I'm scared to death of a murder hornet. I don't even know what a murder hornet is. I don't even know how to say it, and much less know what it is. But I'm tuning in because I got to find out. Today we're continuing our series and wrapping it up called Crippled By. We've looked at 3 different parts. We talked about doubt last week. In week 1, we talked about anxiety. And today we're going to talk about how do we overcome being crippled by fear. Fear is an unpleasant, write this down this morning, unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. Chapman University recently released, they have an annual study of fears. The fears that Americans have. You might think that we would see things like sharks or public speaking or heights on their top 10 list, but that's not the case. I'm going to give you the top 10 fears of Americans. 2024, they just released this a couple of weeks ago. Number 10, 52.5% of Americans are fearful of biological warfare. Think about that for a second. I've never experienced biological warfare in my life, but over half of Americans are afraid of it. Number 9, 52.7%. I think this is a more, sane fear is a terrorist attack. Sure, we've seen that happen. Number 7, 55%, and this is tied with another one, 55% of Americans are afraid of the U.S. becoming involved in another world war. 55% also are afraid of North Korea using their nuclear weapons. Number 6, 55.7% are afraid of not having enough money for the future. Number 5, 55.8% are afraid of Russia using nuclear weapons. So we trust North Korea more than we trust Russia. 57.8% of Americans are afraid of the people that they love dying. 58.3% are afraid of cyber terrorism. And number 2, people I love becoming seriously ill. 58.4% of Americans are afraid of that. And number 1, 65.2%, and I'm sure this will not surprise you in an election year, are afraid of corrupt government officials. Oh, come on, you can laugh about that. As a kid in the 80s, I was convinced that I would have more problems with quicksand. And I was also afraid after watching Red Dawn that the Russians were going to invade my campus and I was going to have to go I always had a plan. Like, this is where, if the Russians invade, I'm going here. If the Russians invade, I always had a plan growing up because I was afraid. I'd watched Red Dawn, and surely if it happened in the movies, it was going to happen in real life. And I was going to be as good as Patrick Swayze. I can tell you that right now. I may not can dance like him, but I'm going to Wolverine like him, I guarantee you, all right? There you go. Seeing if y'all are awake this morning. Fear. It's crippling. America, 65% are worried about corrupt government officials. It seems the majority of our political ads play off those fears. If the number one fear of Americans is corrupt government officials, both sides are playing to that fear. Even the rhetoric this week, and I don't care which side you're on, I'm an equal opportunity offender this morning. Each side used fear tactics this week. We had one side calling the other Hitler, the other side saying the other was a threat to democracy. Those are direct quotes this morning. I'm not sensationalizing it this morning. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm your friend. My name is Rusty. So how do we overcome fear? It's around us. Every time I talk to people, people are scared. They're scared about the economy. They're scared about the election. They're scared about this. And I'm like, how do we overcome this? Well, I've got an easy solution this morning. Here's what I want you to do. This morning, I want you to turn off the news for the next 2 weeks. Well, maybe it's a little more complicated than that. I want us to look at some of the common fears that we face. Number 1 is the fear of failure. What if we make mistakes? What if I blow it? What if I mess up? What if I completely fail? Second one is fear of rejection. What if I'm rejected? What if my family or friends leave me? What if I've turned away from this promotion? What if they don't want me? Then there's the fear, write this down, of uncertainty. I think that's where we're at right now as Americans when we're looking at the landscape of the next couple of weeks where people are afraid of uncertainty. There are many that fear what lies ahead. It's really is a fear based on us not having control. As long as I'm in control, I know where I'm going. For some, this is why there's so much angst in the world right now. We don't know. We can't trust the media. We can't trust the polls. We don't really know what is true. In fact, I had a pastor friend of mine tell me this last week that his realtor said to him, they said, you should take your house off the market and put it back on right after the election. That way it'll go back on the MLS. So if you're selling a house here, I'm not giving you financial advice, but I have a realtor in this house that was shaking her head yes. And so here's what's happening this morning. Right now, take it off the market, put it back on, and what his realtor said is that once the election is over, they expect 6 good months of real estate no matter who wins. Why? People are scared of uncertainty right now. They don't want to buy a car, they don't want to buy a house, they don't want to do anything because they're scared. The fear of uncertainty cripples people to where they don't want to make a major purchase until they know who is going to be in control. The fear of change. We don't like change. It messes up our routine. We like to sit in the same places, and y'all throw me off when you're not sitting in those places. Be like, was so-and-so here today? Well, yeah. Oh, well, they were on the other side of the church. In his book, Leadership Pain, author Sam Chan accurately explains change only happens when our level of desire, or actually desperation, rises above the level of our fears. Wow. A great story in the Bible is the story of Elijah. I love Elijah. One of the reasons I like Elijah as a character in the Bible is I believe Elijah is relatable. Now, I've never been swept up by a chariot of fire and taken up to heaven, but if you look at Elijah and how he responded before that moment, you can see that we can relate to him. In fact, James chapter 5, James explained it like this. He said Elijah was as human as we are. And yet, when he prayed earnestly, there was no rain, that no rain would fall. None fell for 3.5 years. Then when he prayed again, the sky sent down rain and the earth began to yield its crops. So let me set up where we're at in this story right now. If you look at 1 Kings chapter 17 and 18, we see that there's a severe famine in the land. Elijah had been up to this point, he had been taken care of by ravens. Ravens just came and fed him. They brought him bread and they brought him meat every day for years. And after the brook dried up, though, Elijah goes to this widow's house. And she has enough oil and enough flour for one last meal. And Elijah told her, he said, would you prepare the last meal, but give me some bread first? And so she did. And God continued to provide flour and oil for her household. It was an amazing miracle. Her son became sick and then died, and Elijah carried him upstairs and he prayed, and God answered his prayer, and the child was raised from the dead. Elijah then challenged the prophets of Baal to this spiritual duel. The God who answered by fire was the true God, and guess what? Elijah won. He had just prayed for rain and it began to rain. That's the moment in history that James is referencing. I would say that Elijah had a pretty good success rate. He showed no fear of hunger, no fear of death, no fear of crowds, no fear of the famine, no fear of government leadership. He showed no fear. 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 1. When Ahab got home, he told Jezebel everything Elijah had done, including the way he had killed all the prophets of Baal. So Jezebel sent this message to Elijah. May the God strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you just as you killed them. Verse 3, Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. We respond to fear in different ways. One of the ways we see that Elijah responded to fear was by running away. Write that down this morning. He was afraid and he fled for his life. That's a natural reaction. Avoiding the situation. Now, if you're like me, or if you're around me long enough, you know that I'm not really a fan of the canine variety. If you're a dog lover, God bless you. But dogs dislike me. Actually, that's not entirely true. When dogs actually love me, when they just love me for the wrong reason. They look at me and they think, hey, there's lunch. Growing up, I'm sitting at my aunt's house, not even looking at her dog, little poodle, not playing with it, not talking it. I'm just sitting there eating my cinnamon rolls and my bacon and drinking my chocolate milk. Come on, somebody. When all of a sudden, her little dog reaches up and decides to have his own breakfast. My gluteus maximus bites me right here. So I have this healthy fear of dogs. The bigger the dog, the greater the fear. Several years ago, Sash and I were living in Oklahoma City at the time. Oklahoma City is a metropolitan area of about 1 million people at the time. And we were looking to buy a house, and we finally found a house that we were going to buy, and we went to put an offer on it. And so Sasha's inside with our realtor. We had done the tour. We were about to sign the papers. And I go outside to walk and act like I know what I'm doing and look at the foundation, like I'm looking for cracks in the brick, and I'm checking this thing out. I'm giving it the once over, and I'm excited. I'm looking at the house. All of a sudden, the neighbor pulls up. He opens up the back seat of his car, and out pops a German Shepherd the size of Idaho. He sees me and he says, "It's dinner time." Now, I do what any grown man would do in this situation. I reach down, I pet him. No, are you crazy? I didn't do that. I ran as fast as I could away from the dog. In fact, if they would have clocked me that day, my 40 time would have been a 4.2. I probably could have made the Olympic king. The man yells, "He won't bite you." And I'm looking at the teeth and going, "Yeah, right." And so I'm running, and I see this group of kids playing. And so I start running toward them. In my mind, it's survival of the fittest. Actually, I was hoping a large crowd would spook the kid, would spook the dog, and he would run, turn, and run back. And so I run into the middle of this pack of kids that's in the driveway, catty corner across from the house, and I'm running as fast as I can. I pass the kids up, and I run into the neighbor's garage. By this time, the owner has gotten the dog, and and I'm scared out of my mind. He's got the dog, and he's got him on a leash, and everything's fine. And I look up, and I see 5 or 6 kids that are looking at me, and I see this lady that's looking at me funny, and they all say, "Hey, Pastor Rusty." Did I remind you that we're in a metropolitan area of 1 million people? And I just happened to run into the garage of a family from our church. Embarrassing? Yes. What was even worse is having to go back across the street into the house and tell Sasha what I just did. I wanted to run away from her too. It's natural to run away from your fears. It's a natural reaction. We're afraid to share about Jesus, so we avoid it. We're afraid of heights, so we don't ride Mr. Freeze. We're afraid of failure, so we don't try. We're afraid of what the government may do, so we stockpile dried beans and rice in preparation for the apocalypse. We're afraid of not having enough, so we hoard. We're afraid of rejection, so we don't put ourselves out there. We're afraid of change, so we don't change churches or jobs or anything, because it's easier to not change than to lose the control that we have. We're afraid of uncertainty, so we hole up in our own cave until things seem a little more certain again. Fear is crippling. It cripples the church. It cripples the follower of Christ. Isaiah 41:10, "Don't be afraid, for I am with you." I wish I would have remembered that when the German Shepherd was chasing me. He says, "Don't be discouraged, for I'm your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand." The second thing I want you to see here is that seeing our fears bigger than they really are. That's how we respond to fear. We see our fears bigger than what they really are. Verse 4, "Then he went alone into the wilderness, traveling all day. He sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. 'I have had enough, Lord,' he said. 'Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who've already died.'" Elijah was afraid. He complained. Worse, he made things appear worse than they really were. If you were to read on in the story, he's complaining to God at one point on the mountain. He's like, "I'm the only prophet left. Everybody else is gone. I'm the only one left." But he wasn't the only one. I can't tell you how many times I've had a person come to me with something that was in their minds, a huge issue, a huge fear. And it's like the window of their life is fogged up. I wish I could just wipe it off and show them the reality of their situation, that their fear is not as big as their God. This point kind of reminded me Pastor Ben, do we have that video queued up, ready to go? This point reminded me of this commercial. I wanted you to check it out this morning.
Let's hide in the attic.
No, in the basement. Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy? Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart. Yeah, okay.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
This was a good idea. Shh, I'm being quiet. Breathing on me.
If you want to save on car insurance, you switch to Geico.
The fear is there. The running car is the solution. Instead, the kids play into their fear. They see it, if I get in the running car, surely we're going to die. No, that actually would be the smart, intelligent thing. How about we go hide behind these chainsaws? We can't play into our fear. We can't see it bigger than what it really is. God is the solution. He's the running car. Get in. Get in. Fear is not bigger than God. There's nothing that can stop our God. He's bigger than our fear. Faith in him is bigger than our fear. Psalm 34 says, I prayed to the Lord and he answered me. He freed me from all my fears. Those who look to him for help will be radiant with joy. No shadow of shame will darken their face. So how do we respond to fear? It's what the word of the Lord came to us today. We got to get into God's presence. Come on, somebody. Will you say amen? Verse 9. I love this story. There he came to a cave where he spent the night. But the Lord said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? Has God ever said that to you? What are you doing? What are you doing? You're so afraid. You're so scared. What are you doing? And Elisha replies, I've zealously served the Lord God Almighty. But the people of Israel broken down their covenant with you, torn down your altars, and killed every one of your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. Now think about this. This is a man who had been fed by ravens, who had seen the dead raised to life. He'd called down fire from heaven. And he's running for his life. He's seeing his problem bigger than what it really is. And he's sitting here saying, I'm the only prophet left. Verse 11, go out, stand before me on the mountain. And the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. And when Elisha heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. It was in God's presence that Elijah overcame his fear. It was in the presence of God. It was standing there on the mountain. Now, sometimes God comes in the wind. We saw it on the day of Pentecost. Sometimes he comes in the fire, the tongues of fire, day of Pentecost. Sometimes God comes with a shaking. The place where they were at in the book of Acts was shaken. But sometimes, guys, God comes in a still small voice. He comes in a gentle whisper. When you're crying, when you're scared, when you're running, when you're afraid, and God is there and he's saying, listen, I'm here. I'm in control. No matter what happens in this life, no matter what happens in the next couple of weeks, no matter what happens in the next couple of years, no matter if all of the top 10 fears happen that Americans are afraid of, God is still God. Can I get a good amen on that this morning? So what is your fear? If you went and read the rest of the story of Elijah, and I wish I had time this morning to unpack it for you, but I don't. But he went and he ended up standing toe to toe with Ahab. He not only went back to the land, but he went back to the husband of the woman who was trying to kill him. And then he prophesied their deaths. And if you read the book, you know that exactly what he said would happen, happened. 100%. He batted 1,000 on that. There was no mistake. He said, this is what's going to happen. And Jezebel, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to end up being down, and the dogs are going to come and lick your blood. And that's exactly what happened. Read the book. Don't wait for the movie. I'm telling you. Yeah, you don't want to see that in a movie, by the way. I just realized what I said there. I don't want to watch anybody licking blood, so let's move on. So what is your fear? What's the thing right now that's gripping your heart, that's crippling you? Church, I want to see us walk in liberty, walk in freedom. We don't have to be afraid. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Why? Because I am a child of God. Come on. I'm no longer a slave to fear because I am a child of the Most High God. My God is bigger than any problem, any circumstance. I don't know what you're walking through this morning. I don't know what's gripping your heart, crippling you. But let me just give you some good news this morning. God, in 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline." Some translations say sound mind. Sound mind. So whatever you're walking through this morning, whatever's crippling you this morning, turn it to God. Give it to God. Step out on the mountain this morning, church. Come on, step out on the mountain. Don't worry about whatever's going on in your life. Give it to God today. Would you stand with me this morning? Father, thank you. I thank you today that we can walk in freedom and liberty. For whom the Son sets free is free indeed. No matter what's going on in our life. God, no matter what our fear is, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of the death of someone we love, whatever it is, fear of being hurt, whatever it is, God, we can bring those fears to you. And God, we know that our faith in you is bigger than our fear.